Have you ever shot awake in the dead of night for no reason at all? That sudden, heart-pounding awareness, where the silence of your own home feels wrong. For centuries, folklore has warned about this specific moment. It's believed that between 3 and 4 a.m., demonic power reaches its absolute peak. They say this hour was created for one reason: to mock the divine and allow evil to cross into our world. They call it the devil's hour. That sudden jolt from a deep sleep, the glance at the clock reading 3 a.m., and the inescapable feeling that you are not alone. It's a surprisingly common human experience. But what if it's more than just a coincidence? Across cultures and centuries, the time between 3 and 4 in the morning has been feared. It's known as the witching hour, or more ominously, the devil's hour. 2 names for the same terrifying idea. This isn't just a random spooky story. It's a deep-seated belief with roots in theology, folklore, and a history of fear that has followed us into the modern age. Folklore tells us this is the time when the veil between our world and the supernatural realm is at its thinnest. It's a window where spirits, demons, and other malevolent entities are thought to be at their most powerful, able to influence the living world in ways they can't at any other time. But where did this specific fear of 3 a.m. come from? To understand that, we have to look at the powerful symbolism it was designed to defy. Mara Ellison woke as if surfacing from a depth she had no memory of sinking into. Her breath tore from her lungs in a sharp, startled gasp, and for a moment she didn't know where she was. The darkness around her felt thick, almost physical, as though it had weight and temperature and intention. It pressed against her eyes, her skin, the soft space beneath her ribs. Her heart thudded unevenly, trying to catch up to a body that had already decided to panic. She lay still, listening to the silence, waiting for her mind to explain why she had woken like this. Violently, abruptly, as if someone had yanked her up from sleep by the spine. Her phone screen glowed faintly on the nightstand, a small, indifferent rectangle of cold blue light. She turned her head toward it, and the numbers stared back at her with a precision that felt mocking. 3 a.m. Exactly. Not 2:59, not 3:01, not even a second off. The digits were perfect, unwavering, as though they had been waiting for her. Mara swallowed, her throat dry. She didn't remember dreaming. She didn't remember any noise. She didn't remember anything at all except the sensation, the unmistakable, primal certainty that something had been close to her. Too close, close enough to breathe against her ear. She pushed herself upright slowly, her muscles trembling with the aftershocks of adrenaline. The house around her was still, but not in the comforting way a home should be at night. This stillness felt watchful, expectant, like the air itself was holding its breath. Her eyes drifted toward the vent near the floor, a simple metal grate, old and slightly rusted, the kind of thing she had never paid attention to in the daylight. But now, in the oppressive quiet of 3 a.m., it seemed different. Too dark, too deep, as if the shadows inside it were thicker than the shadows in the rest of the room. She didn't know why she was staring at it. She didn't know why her skin prickled. She didn't know why her breath hitched in her throat, until she heard it. A whisper, soft, wet, barely audible. It slid through the vent like a secret escaping from a place it had no right to be. Mara. Her name. Not spoken. Practiced. Her body went rigid, every nerve tightening at once. She stared at the vent, unable to move, unable to blink, unable to breathe. The whisper didn't come again, but the echo of it clung to the air like humidity, thick and cloying. She waited and waited and waited, but the vent remained still, silent, innocent, as if nothing had happened at all. Mara forced herself to exhale, though the breath came out shaky and uneven. She told herself it was a dream, a half-dream, a remnant of some nightmare she couldn't remember. Houses made noises, old vents carried sounds, sleep played tricks. But deep inside her chest, beneath the rational explanations she tried to stack, like sandbags, something colder whispered a different truth. She hadn't woken up on her own. Something had woken her. She lay back down slowly, pulling the blanket up to her chin, though it did nothing to warm her. The darkness felt heavier now, as if it had shifted closer, as if it had taken an interest. Her eyes drifted toward the phone again. The numbers hadn't changed. 3 a.m., frozen, perfect, waiting. She closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come. Only the memory of the whisper, only the feeling of being watched. And somewhere deep in the house, or beneath it, something exhaled. Morning arrived reluctantly, as though the sun itself hesitated to cross the threshold of Mara's house. Light seeped in through the blinds in thin, hesitant lines, illuminating the dust that drifted lazily through the air. Everything looked normal in the soft daylight, painfully, mockingly normal. And yet the memory of the whisper clung to her like a damp cloth. She moved through her morning routine with the mechanical precision of someone trying not to think. Coffee, shower, clothes, but every sound felt too sharp, every shadow too deep, every corner too aware. The vent in her bedroom seemed to follow her in her mind, its darkness lingering behind her eyes no matter where she went. By noon, she gave up, pretending she wasn't shaken. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and typed the question she had been avoiding since dawn. Why do people wake up at 3 a.m.? The search results bloomed across the screen in a chaotic collage of superstition, folklore, and half-baked theories. Articles about sleep cycles, posts about stress, videos claiming paranormal activity. But one phrase appeared again and again, like a thread woven through every culture, every belief system, every whispered warning. The Devil's Hour. She clicked a link without thinking, drawn to it, the way a moth is drawn to a flame it doesn't understand. The page was old, the kind of website that looked abandoned, forgotten by time. The text was small, the background a sickly yellow, the comments section frozen in a decade-old conversation. Her eyes skimmed the words. Between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., the veil is weakest. Spirits walk, demons whisper. If you hear your name, do not answer. Mara leaned back in her chair, her pulse quickening. She told herself it was nonsense, the kind of thing people wrote when they wanted to scare themselves. But the words clung to her, sticky and persistent. She scrolled further. A user with a long-deleted account had written a single line. It wakes those it wants. Her breath caught. She didn't know why that sentence hit her so hard, but it did. It felt like a finger pressing against the back of her neck. Her phone buzzed beside her. She jumped, knocking over her coffee. The mug clattered to the floor, liquid spreading across the wood in a dark, creeping stain. Her heart hammered as she reached for the phone. A new voicemail. No caller ID. Her thumb hovered over the play button. She didn't want to listen. She needed to listen. The message began with static. Soft, distant, like wind moving through a long, narrow tunnel. Then the static shifted, curled inward, shaped itself into something almost human. A voice. Her voice. But wrong. Too soft. Too close. Too familiar in a way that made her stomach twist. Mara, don't look in the mirrors tonight. The message ended abruptly, leaving a silence that felt heavier than the words themselves. She stared at the phone, her breath shallow. She hadn't said those words. She hadn't recorded anything. She hadn't spoken to anyone all morning, and yet the voice was hers, her tone, her cadence, her breath. But there was something beneath it, a faint echo, a second voice layered under the first, like someone whispering along with her, guiding her mouth, shaping her words. She dropped the phone onto the desk, her hands trembling. The room felt smaller now, the walls leaning in, the air thickening. She looked toward the hallway mirror, the one she passed every morning without a second thought. For the first time in her life, she felt afraid of her own reflection. The house creaked softly, as if shifting its weight, as if listening. Mara closed the laptop with a shaky hand. She didn't want answers anymore. She wanted silence. She wanted distance. She wanted the world to make sense again. But deep inside her, beneath the fear and the denial and the fragile rationality she clung to, something darker whispered a truth she didn't want to face. The whisper last night hadn't been a dream, and the voice on the voicemail wasn't a glitch. Something had found her, something that knew her name, something that wanted her awake, and it was only 3 p.m. Night was coming, and with it, the hour that belonged to something else. Night returned with the quiet confidence of something that knew it would not be resisted. The sun slipped away behind the trees, and the house seemed to exhale as darkness settled into its corners, its beams, its bones. Mara tried to distract herself. Television murmuring in the background, lights on in every room, a book open in her lap. But none of it mattered. The house felt different now, attentive, as though it had been waiting all day for the moment she would finally be alone with it again. By the time she climbed into bed, exhaustion clung to her like a second skin. She told herself she would sleep through the night. She told herself she would not wake at 3 a.m. She told herself the whisper had been a trick of her mind, a half-dream, a misfired neuron. But the house had other plans. She drifted into sleep slowly, reluctantly, like someone wading into cold water. And for a while, there was nothing. No dreams, no whispers, no sense of time passing. Just a soft, heavy darkness. Then the footsteps began. They were faint at first, so soft she thought they were part of a dream. But they grew clearer, more deliberate, each step dragging slightly, as though something heavy was being pulled across the floorboards. The sound came from above her, the attic. Her eyes snapped open, her breath caught in her throat. The attic had no entrance, no stairs, no ladder. It was sealed, a relic of the house's original design, a space no one had touched in decades. She had always assumed it was empty, filled with dust and insulation and nothing else. But something was walking in it now. She lay frozen, staring at the ceiling as the footsteps moved slowly across the length of the attic. One step, a pause, another step, a longer pause, as though whatever was up there was listening for her reaction. Her heart pounded so loudly she was afraid it would give her away. The footsteps stopped directly above her bed. Silence, stretched thin and taut, like a wire pulled to the point of snapping. Then came the knock. Soft, gentle, almost polite. A single tap from the other side of the ceiling. Mara's breath trembled out of her. She clamped a hand over her mouth, terrified that even the sound of her breathing might provoke whatever waited above her. The knock came again, a little louder, a little more insistent. She couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't understand how something could be in a space that wasn't supposed to exist. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the knocking stopped. The silence that followed was worse. She forced herself to sit up, her body shaking. She needed to get out of the room. She needed light, movement, anything that wasn't this suffocating stillness. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood, her knees weak. The hallway outside her bedroom was dim, lit only by the faint glow of a nightlight she had plugged in months ago and forgotten about. She stepped into the hall, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. A picture frame lay shattered on the ground. She stared at it, her breath catching. She hadn't heard it fall. She hadn't heard anything except the footsteps above her. But the frame was broken, glass scattered like ice across the floorboards. She knelt down slowly, picking up the photograph inside. Her blood ran cold. It wasn't her photo. It wasn't any photo she had ever seen. It was a picture of her bedroom, taken from above, taken from the attic. The angle was impossible. The lighting was wrong. The shadows were too long, too sharp, too deliberate. Her bed was in the center of the frame. Her sleeping form was visible beneath the blankets, and in the corner of the room, near the vent, the shadows were darker than they should have been, thicker, almost shaped. She dropped the photo, her hands trembling violently. The house creaked softly, as though shifting its weight again, as though settling into a more comfortable position. Mara backed away from the broken frame, her breath shallow and uneven. She felt the walls closing in, the air tightening around her. She didn't know what was in the attic. She didn't know how long it had been there. She didn't know how it had taken the picture. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The house remembered things she didn't, and it was starting to show her. The day crawled by in a haze of unease, each hour stretching thin and brittle like old paper. Mara moved through her home as though it were a museum of someone else's life. Touching nothing, avoiding mirrors, flinching at the smallest creak of the floorboards. The photograph from the attic lay where she had dropped it, face down on the hallway floor, as if turning it over again might invite something she wasn't ready to see. By evening, the house felt colder. Not physically. The thermostat insisted everything was normal, but in a way that seeped into her bones. A quiet, creeping chill that made her feel as though she were being watched from the inside out. She found herself back at her desk, the glow of the laptop screen casting a pale halo across her face. She didn't want to search for more answers, but the questions gnawed at her, sharp and insistent. She typed without thinking, her fingers moving as though guided by something deeper than curiosity. Devil's Hour folklore rules. The search results were stranger this time. Older, more obscure. Websites that looked abandoned. Forums with usernames long deleted. Pages written in languages she didn't recognize. She clicked through them one by one, her pulse quickening with each new fragment of information. Then she found it. A thread buried so deep, it felt like stumbling into a forgotten room in a house she thought she knew. The page was nearly empty. A single post, a single reply, both written over a decade ago. The text was small, the font uneven, as though typed by someone whose hands were shaking. She leaned closer. There are rules for the hour that doesn't belong to us. Her breath caught. 3 rules, always 3. Her eyes moved down the page, each line sinking into her like a cold blade. 1. Never speak during the devil's hour. 2. Never look into a mirror at 3 a.m. 3. Never answer when it calls your name. Mara felt her stomach twist. She had broken all 3 without even knowing they existed. She had spoken, she had looked, she had listened, and it had answered. She closed the laptop, her hands trembling. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker, as though the house itself had leaned in to read over her shoulder. She stood slowly, her legs unsteady, and walked toward the bathroom without knowing why. The door was slightly ajar. She didn't remember leaving it that way. A faint glow seeped from beneath the door, the soft, flickering light of the bathroom bulb. She reached out and pushed the door open with the tips of her fingers, her breath shallow. The mirror was fogged, not from her shower, not from steam, from the inside. Condensation clung to the glass in thick, uneven streaks, as though something had pressed its face against the other side. The fog pulsed faintly, as if breathing. She stepped closer, unable to stop herself. The air in the bathroom felt colder, heavier, as though it had been waiting for her. She stared at the mirror, her reflection a vague, shifting silhouette behind the veil of condensation. Then something moved behind the fog. A shape, tall, thin, wrong. It slid across the glass with a slow, deliberate motion, leaving a faint trail in the condensation. Mara stumbled back, her heart slamming against her ribs. The shape paused, as though listening. Then a handprint appeared on the inside of the mirror. 5 long fingers, pressed from the other side. The fog thickened around it, swirling like breath on cold glass. Mara backed into the hallway, her pulse roaring in her ears. She didn't scream. She couldn't. The fear was too deep, too heavy, too complete. The handprint slowly dragged downward, leaving a streak in the condensation. as though whatever was behind the mirror was trying to step through. She turned and fled, her footsteps echoing through the house. She didn't stop until she reached the living room, where she collapsed onto the couch, her breath shaking, her hands cold. The house settled around her, quiet and patient. She had broken the rules, all of them, and whatever lived in the hour that didn't belong to her knew it. The house grew quieter over the next few days, but it was not the kind of quiet that brought peace. It was the quiet of a held breath, of something waiting, of a predator crouched just beyond the edge of sight. Mara moved through the rooms like a trespasser, careful not to disturb whatever fragile balance kept the house from shifting again. She kept the lights on. She avoided the mirrors. She slept with her bedroom door open, as though the hallway might offer some protection. But the silence did not last. It began with a faint murmur in the walls, so soft she thought it was the wind at first, a low, indistinct hum that rose and fell like distant conversation. She pressed her ear to the plaster, listening, her pulse quickening. The sound was muffled, layered, as though several voices were speaking at once from far away. Then one voice separated itself from the rest. A woman's voice, soft, familiar. "Mara." She jerked back, her breath catching. The voice had come from the wall beside her, from deep within the structure of the house. She stared at the plaster, her skin prickling. The voice came again, clearer this time, threaded with a warmth that made her stomach twist. "Mara, sweetheart, why aren't you answering me?" Her mother's voice. But her mother lived 3 states away, and her mother never called her sweetheart. Mara backed away slowly, her heart a-pounding. She knew it wasn't real. She knew it couldn't be real, but the voice was perfect. The tone, the cadence, the gentle lilt at the end of each sentence. It was her mother, and it wasn't. The wall hummed again, and another voice emerged. A man's voice, low, tired, familiar in a way that made her chest tighten. "Mara, we need to talk." Her ex, the one she hadn't spoken to in over a year, the one whose voice she had tried so hard to forget. She pressed her hands over her ears, but the voices seeped through her fingers, through her skin, through the air itself. They overlapped, tangled, whispered over one another in a chorus of memories she had buried. "Mara, please. Why did you leave? You promised. Come back. Come home. Come closer." She stumbled backward, her breath shaking. The voices grew louder, more insistent, as though the walls themselves were swelling with them. She fled down the hallway, but the voices followed, slipping through the plaster, traveling through the beams, echoing through the vents. Then a new voice joined them, a child's voice, soft, fragile, echoing with a sadness that cut deeper than fear. "Why did you leave me in the dark, Mara?" She froze. The hallway tilted beneath her feet, her vision blurred. She pressed her back against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor, her knees pulled to her chest. The child's voice drifted through the house like a cold breeze, brushing against her skin. "You said you wouldn't go." Her throat tightened. She didn't know this voice. She didn't recognize it. But something inside her, something deep and old and wounded, reacted as though she did. The walls pulsed softly, as though breathing. "Mara." The child whispered, "It's so dark in here." She squeezed her eyes shut, tears slipping down her cheeks. She didn't know what the house wanted. She didn't know why it was using her memories, her fears, her guilt. She didn't know how it knew the things she had never spoken aloud. But she knew one thing: the voices weren't coming from the past. They weren't coming from her mind. They weren't coming from anything human. They were coming from the walls, from the spaces between them, from something that had been listening to her for a very long time. And now, it wanted her to listen back. Do you want to know what happens next? If so, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because it really helps out the channel. If you want the next part of the story, comment next part in the comments. We have new stories releasing every day, so until then, haunt you later.